That evening felt like any other. Rain was tracing lines down the window, the city's glow diffused and muted, and I was alone with the familiar quiet of my apartment. The days had become a pattern: work, a stop at the market, dinner reheated in the microwave, a show playing low in the background, all of it contained and predictable. I had grown comfortable in this routine, learned to savor the solitude, let my world shrink to fit the boundaries of my rooms. Even the sounds of the building, footsteps in the hallway, muffled laughter from the neighbors, faded into the background noise of my evenings. I barely noticed when someone new moved in next door. There was only a brief commotion on the landing, the scrape of cardboard boxes against tile, a few words exchanged with the landlord. I caught a glimpse of her once, carrying a potted plant and a duffel bag, hair tied back, her movements brisk and purposeful. She seemed younger than me, but not by much. I didn't linger at the window. People came and went in this building, and after years of drifting acquaintances, I'd stopped expecting anything from new neighbors. That night, the rain grew heavier, a steady percussion that made the air feel dense, electric. I had just settled in with a mug of tea and a blanket when I heard the doorbell. It was so unexpected that I hesitated, cup paused halfway to my lips, a flicker of unease in my chest. I almost ignored it, but the second chime was persistent, almost cheerful. When I opened the door, she stood there, damp curls escaping her hood, cheeks flushed from the weather, holding a plastic bag and a DVD case. She looked a little lost, but her eyes were bright, curious, scanning my face for a sign of welcome or rejection. For a moment, I thought of closing the door and going back to my safe evening, but something about her posture, a mixture of hope and apology, kept me in place. I stepped aside and let her in, and immediately my living room felt different, like a new current of air had swept through. She took in the space, remarking on the books lining the shelves, the old movie posters on the wall, the way I'd arranged the furniture. Her presence was warm, unobtrusive, but impossible to ignore. She moved around as if she already belonged, placing the bag on the kitchen counter, eyeing the kettle, setting the DVD down near the television. I noticed how the lamplight caught the droplets in her hair, the subtle scent of coconut lotion she carried with her, the way her laughter filled the corners of the room when she nearly dropped the popcorn. We made tea together, a small dance of passing cups, spoons clinking, her fingers brushing mine by accident or intention, I couldn't tell. My apartment, usually a shelter for one, began to feel like it was expanding around us. We brought the mugs to the sofa, settled in under the same blanket, legs tucked beneath us, her knee nearly touching mine. The television glowed in the corner, waiting, but neither of us reached for the remote. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, the way she ran her fingers over the edge of a pillow, how she glanced at me and smiled when she caught my gaze. Every detail felt heightened, sharper, as if I was seeing my own home for the first time. As the rain continued outside, her laughter and her warmth seeped into my solitude. I realized, as the evening stretched on, that I wasn't thinking about the film at all. I was watching her, letting the presence of someone new turn the ordinary into something charged, something almost dangerous. The city faded into background static, and my world, so carefully maintained, opened a crack. She didn't seem in a hurry to leave, and I didn't want her to. For the first time in a long time, I found myself wondering what might happen if I let the night go on just a little bit longer. Her scent lingered long after she crossed the threshold, a gentle, tropical trace that floated through my apartment, settling on the cushions and curtains, making even the air feel warmer. It wasn't just the coconut lotion, though that was unmistakable, it was something richer, a softness that clung to the fabric of the evening. I noticed it each time I moved around the room, especially in the kitchen, where her laughter had mingled with the steam from the kettle. The ordinary corners of my home felt different now, colored by the memory of her energy and the subtle marks she left behind. I found myself retracing our steps, collecting the small evidences of her visit, a mug left on the coffee table, a stray kernel of popcorn on the rug, the DVD propped up against the side of the television. Every object seemed to hum with leftover possibility, as if the room was holding its breath, waiting for her to return. I remembered the way she had wandered through the shelves, fingers trailing along spines, pausing to read titles, asking questions about authors I hadn't thought about in years. She moved like someone testing the temperature of a new place, at first tentative, then more at ease, as if claiming a little piece of it for herself. My own movements became more deliberate. I found myself lingering in the spots where she had stood, brushing my hand across the place she'd sat on the sofa, breathing in the ghost of her fragrance when I bent to pick up the discarded blanket. Her presence seemed to reach into my habits, shifting their rhythm just enough to remind me that I was not alone anymore, not quite. Even after she left, the echo of her energy settled quietly into the silence, transforming it from emptiness to anticipation. It was strange, this heightened awareness, how I could feel her in the air, in the light, in the way my apartment seemed to invite her back without words. I caught myself smiling at nothing, remembering the curve of her lips as she laughed, the gentle teasing in her eyes, the accidental touch of her knee against mine beneath the blanket. The memory of her warmth became a thread running through the evening, a low, steady hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. By the time night pressed in fully and the rain softened to a whisper, I realized that she had already unsettled something in me. My solitude, once so carefully arranged, felt looser at the edges, more permeable, as if she had found a door I didn't know I'd left unlocked. The scent of coconut and warm skin lingered in the air as I lay in bed, and instead of feeling alone, I felt suspended, waiting for the next time the bell would ring, the next time her laughter would fill the room, the next time her presence would make everything feel new again. The days that followed blurred together, each one marked by small, electric shifts in the atmosphere. She began to stop by more often, sometimes to borrow sugar, sometimes with an excuse as thin as a new recipe or a question about the building's trash schedule. Each time she appeared at my door, I felt a tiny jolt, as if the world was offering me a secret and daring me to accept it. Our conversations stretched longer. She'd stay for tea or help me carry groceries, her hands brushing mine as we reached for the same bag or utensil. Every accidental touch lingered, a soft echo under my skin that I would replay in the quiet afterwards. One evening, she arrived with a bottle of wine and a look that suggested she had something on her mind. The rain had returned, and the apartment felt like a cocoon, thick with warmth and the faint scent of something floral. She made herself at home easily, curling up beside me on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, hair loose and shining in the lamplight. The movie we'd intended to watch was forgotten in the steady build of conversation. I became acutely aware of the way her knee pressed against my thigh, the lightness of her laughter, the searching quality in her eyes when she looked at me just a second too long. The air between us seemed to change texture. Our words grew slower, heavier, as if we were both waiting for something neither of us could name. At one point she reached for the blanket, and her arm brushed across my chest, lingering just a little longer than necessary. My breath caught, not from surprise but from the sudden awareness that something had shifted. I could feel my pulse in places I'd almost forgotten about, my wrists, my neck, deep inside my chest. Her hand rested on the sofa so close to mine that if I moved even an inch, our fingers would tangle. I sat there, paralyzed by the magnitude of such a small possibility. The flicker of her gaze fell to my lips, and I saw her swallow, a tiny movement that sent a rush of heat through me. I shifted closer without thinking, feeling the warmth radiate from her skin. The rest of the room faded away, the noise of the world outside blurring into insignificance. In that hush, every sense became sharper, the softness of the blanket, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the tremor in my own hands as I waited, unsure, hoping for an invitation I didn't dare voice. Her fingertips eventually found mine, tentative and gentle, tracing slow lines across my knuckles. I looked down at our hands, the contrast of skin tones and the hush of promise in that simple touch. The moment stretched on, thick with longing and the silent plea to not let it pass. I turned my hand over, letting her fingers settle in my palm, feeling the full weight of her attention, the spark that jumped between us. It was subtle and quiet, but undeniable, a first ignition, a shared secret. I felt myself opening, softening, wanting more, and in that new hunger there was no fear, only wonder at how something so small could feel so absolutely alive. The world outside faded into a dull and distant echo the night her body truly touched mine. The living room glowed softly with the golden light from a single lamp, shadows pooling in the corners, everything intimate and close. She sat beside me, so near that I could feel the warmth of her skin radiating through the small space between us. The air was dense with anticipation, a hum of energy threading through every heartbeat, every inhale and exhale. I reached out almost without thinking, my fingers brushing along her arm, slow and deliberate, feeling the goosebumps rise beneath my touch. She turned toward me, eyes wide and unguarded, and for a moment it was as if we were suspended between choices, both knowing what would happen next but still savoring the tension of waiting. My hand found the side of her neck, the soft thrum of her pulse, the curve of her jaw. I traced her collarbone, following the line down to her shoulder, marveling at how her skin felt both delicate and strong at once. The silence was rich, full of breath and heartbeat, the unspoken language we'd both learned to read. She leaned into my touch, her own hands finding my waist, tentative at first, then braver, her fingers exploring the small of my back, my ribs, the curve of my hips through the thin fabric of my shirt. Each point of contact sent shivers through me, an exquisite blend of pleasure and disbelief. Our lips met slowly, softly, tasting, testing, learning. I lost myself in the press of her mouth, the way she lingered, the gentle insistence that built with every pass. Her hands slid beneath my shirt, fingers gliding across my bare stomach, and I arched into her touch, sighing at the electric contrast of cool fingertips and the heat rising in my skin. I wanted to remember everything, the way her body pressed against mine, the velvet softness of her thighs, the muscle beneath her curves, the way her hair tumbled around our faces and shut out the rest of the world. I fumbled with her shirt, tugging it upward, feeling the tension in her body melt away as I bared more of her skin. She was beautiful in the half-light, a vision of lines and shadows, her breath coming faster, chest rising and falling beneath my hands. My lips followed the path of my fingers, leaving a trail of kisses along her shoulder, across her collarbone, lower and lower until I felt her tremble beneath me. She pulled me closer, hands sliding under my waistband, gripping, urging me on. Clothes slipped away piece by piece, a careful, reverent unraveling, until nothing separated us but our own awe and want. Our bodies fit together naturally, every curve and hollow aligned as if we'd been carved for this. I learned her with my mouth and hands, the taste of her skin, the rise and fall of her voice as I pressed deeper into her. Her breath hitched when I kissed the inside of her thigh, her back arched when my tongue found the places she'd kept hidden, her hands tangled in my hair as I brought her higher, further, until her cries filled the room and her body shook in my arms. She returned every touch, every kiss, her own exploration as hungry as mine, her fingers finding my need and coaxing it to the surface. I gasped, shuddered, melted under her hands, losing all sense of time, all memory of anything except the pleasure she gave. When we finally collapsed together, skin slick with sweat, legs tangled, chests heaving in the hush, I felt transformed, stripped of every shield, every hesitation, every old wound. We held each other tightly, afraid to let go, afraid that the world would rush back in and take this away. But in that soft, perfect darkness, there was only us, our bodies pressed together, and the knowledge that something inside us had changed forever. Morning crept in slowly, soft and silent, as if it too was afraid to disturb what had happened between us. I lay awake, limbs entangled with hers, our bodies pressed close under a tangled sheet. My cheek rested against her bare shoulder, and her arm draped over my waist, heavy and warm. For a long time, I didn't move, savoring the weight of her, the even rhythm of her breath, the familiar rise and fall of her chest. The room was awash in pale gold, a hush in the air that felt holy, unbroken. My mind replayed every detail of the night, the feel of her lips, the way our hands sought each other out in the dark, the breathless urgency that had given way to a slow and aching tenderness. My body ached in the sweetest ways, my skin still tingling with memory, each heartbeat a silent echo of everything we had shared. When she finally stirred, the moment shifted, but the sense of unreality did not. She blinked, heavy-lidded, her lashes brushing against my collarbone, and for a fleeting second, our eyes met, no masks, no pretense, just the raw, unguarded truth. There was a quiet, almost reverent look on her face, as if she too couldn't quite believe where we had landed. The silence stretched between us, not awkward but profound, filled with meaning that words could only diminish. She traced a line across my stomach with her fingertips, drawing invisible patterns, her touch as gentle as breath. I reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, letting my hand linger, afraid to break whatever fragile spell held us together in that cocoon of morning light. It would have been easy to retreat behind small talk, to act as if this was a simple accident or a one-time lapse. But I couldn't. My mind raced with questions, but my heart held me in place. I searched her eyes for regret and found none, only wonder, a kind of quiet amazement. Something inside me loosened. I realized I had been bracing for rejection, for the cold rush of shame, but there was only warmth, only acceptance. In that suspended moment, everything else receded, the doubts, the rules, the old boundaries I had drawn for myself to stay safe. There was only her and me and the tangled line of our breath, a sense that the world outside had no power here. Eventually, she slid from the bed, wrapping herself in the blanket, her back to me as she stood and stretched in the glow of the window. I watched the play of light on her skin, the way her spine curved, the gentle slope of her shoulder. She moved through the space with a new ease, unhurried, unashamed. I sat up, pulling my knees to my chest, watching her pour coffee into 2 chipped mugs in the kitchen, wearing nothing but the soft drape of my robe. The domesticity of it struck me, how natural it all felt, how the air was no longer heavy with uncertainty but light with possibility. When she handed me my coffee, our fingers brushed, and I saw the hint of a smile flicker at the corners of her mouth. We drifted through the morning quietly, sharing space in a way that was tender and deliberate. I caught myself memorizing every detail, how she cradled her mug, how her hair fell loose over her shoulders, how she glanced at me over the rim of her cup with an expression that was both shy and bold. It was a moment suspended between what we were and what we might become, every second humming with the electricity of the unknown. I felt the urge to speak, to give shape to the swirling emotions, but words seemed clumsy compared to the language our bodies had shared the night before. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, unafraid, letting it say what I couldn't. All day, her presence clung to me like a second skin. When she left for her apartment to shower and change, I wandered the rooms of my place, finding traces of her everywhere, the indent in the pillow, the faint scent of her skin on the blanket, the smudge of lipstick on the rim of a mug. I pressed my face to her side of the bed, breathing in her absence and presence all at once, the memory of her voice still vibrating in my bones. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but not in a way that frightened me. There was a new clarity in the air, as if I could finally see myself in sharp focus after years of looking through frosted glass. When she returned, hair still damp, wearing a faded t-shirt and leggings, the world settled around us again. She moved through the apartment as if she'd always belonged, her things intermingling with mine, the two of us orbiting each other in a slow, graceful dance. Every so often, our hands would meet, reaching for the same spoon, brushing against each other in the hallway, finding one another under the blanket as we watched the rain slide down the windows. The touch was never accidental now. Each time our skin met, something deep and wordless passed between us, A promise, a question, a truth. That evening, as we settled into the quiet together, I realized what had changed. The fear was gone. The ache of longing had transformed into a bright, pulsing certainty. I understood now that we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and I no longer wanted to retreat. The moment of truth was not a single instant, but a slow unfolding, a series of small, deliberate choices to stay open, to stay present, to let myself be seen. I watched her curl up beside me, her head on my shoulder, her arm resting lightly across my waist. I pressed a kiss to her hair and let myself breathe out all the old doubts. In that quiet, golden hour, I knew that I would never again be content with the safety of solitude. Whatever storms might come, whatever the world outside our walls might say, I wanted this, the honesty, the vulnerability, the terrifying, exhilarating risk of being loved and seen. The moment of truth was not a confession spoken aloud, but a living, breathing choice we made with every heartbeat, every glance, every gentle touch in the soft, forgiving light of a new day. The week after that night passed in a kind of shimmering haze, days folding into each other with a lazy warmth. Our new intimacy wrapped itself quietly around my life, reshaping each routine into something softer and brighter. I found comfort in her nearness, the way she would drop by after work and leave her shoes at my door, the way she claimed a corner of my couch with an easy confidence. The lines of my world, once sharp and solitary, blurred with every meal shared, every stolen touch, every late-night laugh. I felt changed, as if I had woken up inside a life I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. She became a presence that lingered in every corner of my apartment. Her hair ties littered the bathroom counter. Her favorite mug appeared among my dishes, left to dry after our morning coffee. Sometimes I'd wake before her, just to watch the peaceful lines of her face in sleep, the soft flutter of her eyelashes against her cheek, the way her arm would reach for me even unconsciously. I wanted more of her, always, her stories, her affection, the simple heat of her body beside mine. Everything felt right. I caught myself imagining a future that reached farther than the next weekend, a home where her keys hung next to mine, a life braided together with hers. And then everything changed, not with a fight or a rupture, but with a silence so complete it stunned me. One afternoon I returned home to find her things missing, her coat, her shoes, the scarf I'd seen her wear nearly every day. The bathroom counter was bare. The favorite mug was gone from the drying rack. My chest squeezed painfully as I moved through the apartment, searching for any sign she had been here at all. I found only emptiness, the quiet echo of her laughter in the walls, the scent of her skin fading into the stale apartment air. There was a note left on the table, folded carefully, my name written in her looping script. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, as if the act itself might hold back the finality of her absence. The words were brief, almost apologetic. She wrote that she was sorry, that she needed to leave, that she hoped I would understand, though she knew I probably never could. She thanked me for the time we shared, told me I had shown her a kind of love she didn't know she could have, but that she couldn't stay. No reason. No explanation. Not a word about what she felt or feared or needed. Just absence where there had been so much life. The world tipped out from under me. I stood in the silence, the letter trembling in my hands, every memory of her surging through me in a wave. Anger, confusion, longing, and a deep, raw ache for answers I would never get. I checked my phone, again and again, searching for a message, a missed call, anything. Days passed. The ache settled into a constant dull throb. Friends noticed my distraction, but I couldn't tell them what I'd lost or how I'd lost it. How do you explain to someone that your whole world was rewritten by a single person and then erased again in a moment? The loneliness came back, colder and sharper than before, but laced now with a restless energy, a need to know, to confront, to scream out the question that never left my mind: why? My neighbors asked about her, where she'd gone, if she was coming back, if everything was alright. I invented stories, excuses, lies that caught in my throat. Each time the doorbell rang, my heart pounded wildly with hope and dread. Every passing figure in the hallway made me freeze, straining for a voice I longed for and resented all at once. I started avoiding the places we had gone together. I hid her photograph in a drawer, but her face burned in my memory, luminous and unreachable. One evening, driven by restlessness and rage, I wrote her a letter, pages and pages of everything I wanted to say, everything I needed her to know. I wrote until my hands cramped and my eyes burned. I never sent it. I tore it into pieces and flushed it away, watching the words swirl and vanish. Still, the need for closure never left me. My mind replayed every moment, every touch, every breathless instant in the dark when we believed the world couldn't touch us. Now that same world felt like an empty stage, the story cut short with no warning. Weeks passed. Her absence became a story in itself, one I lived out in small rituals of grief and anger. I talked to her in my head as I cooked dinner, as I watered the plants, as I tried to sleep. I argued with her ghost, begged her for reasons, cursed her name. Sometimes I wept for her, hot tears I wiped away quickly, ashamed of my own vulnerability. But in quieter moments, a different feeling emerged, one I hadn't expected: defiance. She had left, but she hadn't taken everything. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of loving, still alive. I started inviting friends over, letting new voices and laughter fill the space she'd left behind. I painted the bathroom, rearranged the bookshelves, reclaimed my home as my own. Sometimes it hurt. Sometimes it felt like freedom. The story didn't end with reconciliation or peace or a neat answer. It ended with me standing at my window on a rain-washed evening, watching the city move on without her, knowing that the truth of what we had was real, even if it didn't last. I could have closed myself off again, built my walls higher, turned my anger inward. Instead, I let the world provoke me. I let the unfairness of her leaving fill me with a new, burning hunger, for connection, for risk, for the kind of love that refuses to fade quietly. I wanted someone to ask, to care, to judge, to debate. I wanted the world to see the mess she'd left and to be as outraged as I was. So when people asked what happened, I told the truth, every jagged piece of it. I let them be shocked, be angry, be moved. I let their reactions pour salt in the wound, let their curiosity keep the ache alive. I learned to live with the unfinished, the unresolved, the story that didn't bow to anyone's sense of justice or order. In the end, that was the most honest thing I could do: stay open, stay hurt, stay real. I never did watch the movie we planned that night. The screen stayed blank, a reminder of what could have been. But in that blankness, I saw the shape of everything I still wanted: a life lived wide open, no matter who leaves, no matter how it